So finally, the G20 summit is over. The pliant media and the fawning columnists have delivered their judgment. That the Vishwaguru, the supreme leader, has delivered. And these worthies, the opinion writers, advise anyone who differs with their perception. Don't quibble over small things. On the big stage, India has shown that it has grown up, that it has become Bharat. That is possibly the only new thing that our leadership was able to convey to the world. Leaders, our country, other name is Bharat. Apart from that, tell me what else was the concrete outcome of this mega show. The servile commentators have hyped that our leaders' international standing and prestige ensured that we came out with a consensus document which is called the Delhi Declaration. But these men and women either do not know or do not deliberately mention that all previous G20 summits had also come out with consensus-based communiques. But the leaders of those countries had not thumped their 56-inch chest to appropriate glory for it. It was just a common practice in multilateral gatherings. A common statement is issued. The cheerleaders of the ruling dispensation would of course counter this, saying, Russian invasion of Ukraine is the new elephant in the room. But they should be reminded, Bali summit last November also happened in the shadow of the Russian incursion into Ukraine. And there too, there was a joint document last year as well. But then media in Bali or Jakarta did not go to town anointing the Indonesian leader Joko Widodo as an international cult figure. Even you go back a few years, soon after the annexation of the Crimean Peninsula by Putin's Russia, the G20 summit took place at Brisbane, Australia. That was also a moment of international conflagration. In fact, it was much bigger conflagration than what it is today. The Western world was then also livid. Putin had been called out, but the Brisbane summit still came out with a consensus document. But then, Australian Prime Minister was not hailed as an international statesman by the Australian media or the intelligentsia. It was considered routine. After all, it's a rotating presidency. Every country gets a chance to host it by rotation. And everywhere, the same thing happens. Good, bad, and ugly. But the apologists of our government would insist that we delivered something extra. And what was that extra? What was that claim to fame? That India skillfully navigated the choppy international waters to ensure that African Union was admitted as a full member of G20. What a manufactured lie. As Gurjit Singh, former Indian ambassador to the African Union, has pointed out, in the Bali summit itself last November, the African Union president had demanded that the countries should be included in the G20. That time, he had come as a special invitee. And in Bali summit, the European Union, China, USA, all had lent support to the idea. So it was agreed in principle. The outgoing chief, the Indonesian president, had then announced that the agreed proposal would be adopted formally in the New Delhi summit. The incoming chief, our Prime Minister, had concurred. That Bali proposal was just formalized in the New Delhi summit. It was a formality that was completed after doing the due process. But look at the obsequious commentators going gaga over it, as if it was the outcome of a magic wand waved by our supreme leader over the contentious world leaders. These minions tum-tum that by that one act, our leader has become the voice of the global south. That we have earned the gratitude of 55 countries of Africa. How pompous are we in our self-estimation? African nations know well that the decision had been a foregone conclusion in Bali itself 10 months ago. This brings us to the third aspect of our self-congratulatory message. That the Delhi communique delivered a unanimous resolve to improve the lot of the common people through exemplary takeaways in varied fields like education, healthcare, and growth. That Delhi showed the path for fighting critical issues such as climate change with an urgency shown never before. But pray, where is that urgency seen? Just scan through the Delhi Declaration. It rehashes everything that has been said before in successive G20 summits. And that was presented again. Which country would object to the restatement of the first principles? After all, the Delhi Declaration is just a compilation of wish list, all aspirational with no immediate time-bound action plan. Targets are far away. The Delhi Declaration is replete with those motherhood and apple pie statements that are the staple of all such international congregations. That way, Delhi summit is no different from the G20 summits at Bali, Hamburg, Buenos Aires, Brisbane, or anywhere else. Everywhere, the assembled leaders just paid lip service Take the specific case of climate crisis, which is supposed to get urgent attention of the world leaders. And what is the reality? The same paragraphs in the official statements are recycled again and again, year after year. If some draftsperson is enterprising enough, he or she may just paraphrase it. Look at the Delhi Declaration. It quietly lifts the paragraph from the Bali summit on the takedown of coal. You know, great resolutions have been passed in summit after summit to urgently ensure energy transition, that we must switch from fossil fuel to alternative sources of energy. And what has actually happened? G20 countries today account for 93% of coal-based power projects and power plants. This was more or less the same 15 years ago when G20 came into existence. What has happened year after year in these G20 summits? In the last 15 years, they have just restated their pious wishes. And then hug, eat, drink, do selfies and depart. That's the routine. In a nutshell, G20 summits are just a diplomatic jamboree. Delhi has followed the same footprint, exactly the same footprint. It has only difference, it has conducted it with unprecedented pomp and pageantry. My friend D. Ravikant, who is a business journalist, is based out of Geneva. He said, he had come to cover the G20 events. He said he has been to the last 4 G20 summits. Nowhere had he found that the host city was in a lockdown state as Delhi was in the last extended weekend. He said even in Hamburg, Germany in 2018, the government had allowed anti-globalization protesters to wage their protest a little distance away from the exact venue of the summit. According to Ravikant, all those summits were conducted in a matter-of-fact style, without any show of extravaganza. World leaders must have been appalled to see the vulgar show of prosperity in a country where, by the government's own admission, more than 80 crore people survive on free ration. Let us ask this question. The garish display of colors at Bharat Mandapam and other places, did that do India proud, or it just sent out a message that ours is a country ruled by a noble-ish class with no clue to aesthetics? And what cost it was done? We are a country with one of the lowest per capita GDP among the members of the G20 countries. Why should we sink so much of poor taxpayers' money for these mega shows that are just platforms for empty rhetoric, grandiose words, but little action? Just make a comparison. by a union minister's own testament, we have already spent 4,100 crore rupees. The union minister Meenakshi Lekhi shared this information on 4th September, 5 days before the summit meeting took place. The newspapers reported it. Mind you, this expense is just for Delhi. More than 200 meetings took place in 60 different cities. You can imagine how much more of public money was pumped into this symbolic ceremonial exercise. A TMC MP, Saket Gokhale, drew a comparison. He wrote that Germany, which in fact had 8 times India's per capita GDP, spent 1/7 of what we spent in hosting the G20 summit. When Rajdeep Sardesai, the TV talk show host on TV today, asked Amitabh Kant, much hailed India's Sherpa for G20, about such gargantuan expenses, Kant dismissed it as fake news. He said our expenses were within our budgeted estimates. Mind you, the budgeted expense for G20 was 990 crore. Well, then Saket Gokhale may be spreading fake news because he is an opposition leader. Although, in all fairness, we must say that he was only quoting the official statistics provided by the German government and the union minister, our own government. But let us leave him. But then what about Minister Lekhi? Going by what Amitabh Kant says, she is also tarnishing the image of the government by purveying fake news. I am sure Minister Lekhi has landed herself in trouble by stating the facts, perhaps inadvertently. But of course, one is not sure. We'll wait and watch what happens to her. Remember, ISRO could launch momentous space landing on moon at a fraction of the cost incurred by the other 3 countries which have done so far. And we take pride in it. But look at it. Our government ends up doing routine exercises at a cost much higher than even the rich countries. That is the difference. ISRO is managed by dedicated, talented scientists. But affairs like G20 are managed by megalomaniac leaders and their servile minions who have reduced this country to an event management company.